Deadlifts versus Romanian deadlifts. What are the differences? Let's talk about it.
Don't you want to look good naked?
So there are a bunch of differences between a conventional or a regular deadlift versus a Romanian deadlift, also known as an RDL. And the first thing to think about is the primary muscles that they're working. So with a conventional deadlift, you're going to be working mostly your quads and your glutes. And with a Romanian deadlift or an RDL, it's going to be mostly your glutes and your hamstrings. And so with a conventional deadlift, this is the one where you're going to be bending at both your hips and your knees. And so that's why it's mostly working your quads and your glutes. And then a Romanian deadlift is more so a hip hinge. So you're bending more so only at your hips and keeping your knees slightly bent. And so that's gonna work more your hamstrings, and your glutes. And another thing to think about is the starting position. So with a conventional deadlift, you're gonna be starting from the floor, and with a Romanian deadlift, you're actually gonna be starting from the standing position. And that goes more into thinking about the primary goal of the movement. Whenever you're thinking about what movement you should do or what type of movement you should do, it's all gonna come back to the primary goal. So what is your primary goal? Is it sports specific? Are you looking to build as much muscle as possible? So is it hypertrophy style training? Is it, just things that you enjoy doing? So if you're thinking about a conventional deadlift versus a Romanian deadlift, a conventional deadlift or that type of variation, there's a few different types of conventional deadlifts that you can do, whether it's with a barbell or a trap bar or dumbbells or a cable. The thing to think about with that one though, it's really, can you move or are you moving the most weight from point A to point B? That's what we traditionally think of a conventional deadlift as. And that's great if you're trying to get really, really strong. If you're, again, like I said, a power lifter and you're just trying to move as much weight from the floor and pick it up, but that's not gonna be the best for muscle building. And the reason for that, or hypertrophy, and the reason for that is hypertrophy, we really wanna focus on keeping as much tension in the muscle tissue as possible. So a better option for hypertrophy style training is probably gonna be an RDL. And like I mentioned, with an RDL, because you're starting from the top and you're actually not hitting the floor, you're gonna create a lot of tension within your glutes and your hamstrings, and that's going to transfer into more muscle building potential. The last thing is just enjoyment, right? Do you enjoy doing heavy deadlifts from the floor where you're picking up as much weight as possible and it just makes you feel strong and badass? I know I enjoy that at some points, and I used to do that a lot when I was doing CrossFit training and just doing deadlifts because I really just enjoyed doing them. And then my goals changed a little bit in terms of being the most efficient with my training as possible to build as much muscle as possible. So I switched from doing traditional conventional deadlifts to doing more RDLs, which I mentioned is putting your muscles through a lot more time under tension. So there are a lot of different variations of both conventional and RDL deadlifts. So you can do them with barbells, trap bars, dumbbells, cable machines, bands, water bottle jugs, whatever you have. The most traditional are probably gonna be the barbell, and then what's becoming more popular, at least for me and for what I've seen with my clients, is the trap bar. So using that for both conventional and RDL. So the barbell, you're gonna have your arms in front of you for both variations of the conventional and the RDL. And for some people, that can actually cause a little bit of discomfort, especially depending on your structure of your body and your joint, your shoulder health. Sometimes the barbell is causing a little bit more internal rotation as you're coming down. Versus a trap bar, if you're not feeling super comfortable with a barbell, a trap bar can be a great option because you're gonna have more of a neutral grip. Another thing to think about too is your grip strength. So that's something that I get a lot of questions about is, my grip strength sometimes gives out before my muscles do when I'm doing, a particular exercise, specifically with deadlifts. Especially if the weight starts to get higher, you're gonna start to realize that your hands are gonna, either if they're sweating or you're just losing some of your grip, it can be a great idea to implement certain tools that make that easier. So one tool that I really like are Versa grips. They go around your wrist and then they go around the bar, and that will just allow you to basically hold the bar a little bit easier when the weight gets heavier. And again, this comes down to your primary goal. So if your primary goal is to build as much muscle as possible and get a lot of tension in your glutes and your hamstrings, you don't want your grip to be the limiting factor. You want your glutes and your hamstrings to give out before your grip does. So if your grip is your limiting factor, if you feel like the bar is slipping and you still have some juice left in the tank, so to speak, with your glutes and your hamstrings, then it might make sense to use Versa grips or wrist straps to just allow you to not make that grip the limiting factor. Women, we believe